In today's episode of our photography review show, we're gonna review 67 photos from 27 photographers. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week, I hope you're having an amazing Monday, and I also hope that you're ready for another portion of photography reviews. Now, if you've never been with us before, for those who don't know me, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now, for the past 6 or 7 months, I've been reviewing photos from our photographic community, and it's been very popular. We receive hundreds of photos and from hundreds of photographers. So for this reason, what we had to do, we had to limit the entries to 1 or 2 pictures per photographer per week. And we also each week take the show and divide it between 2 or 3 different parts based on the photography style. We usually look at the landscape photographers, mixed team photographers, and the rest of the photography styles in the last part of the show. Now, before we're gonna jump into the actual reviewing, I have 2 things to share with you. Number 1, make sure you join us in our new Facebook group. It's called Clever Photographer Academy. So lots of fun. We talk all things photography there. We review your photos throughout the week. We answer your photography questions, and we do and organize regular photography competitions. So it's a lot of fun. Make sure you head to Facebook, search for Clever Photographer Academy, and join us today. And the second thing I need to do, I need to introduce you to our photographer of the week from the past episode, and that's what we're gonna do right now. And here we go with one of the most popular part of the show. It's time to look at the photographer of the week. Now, our photographer of the week this week is Sandy Stolzman, all the way from Springfield, Pennsylvania in United States. Now, she recently returned from her trip to Costa Rica, where she was after shooting wildlife photography. And I have to say that the images are absolutely incredible. We are here at her profile right now, which you can definitely check out. There is the link right here. She also has a LinkedIn profile, which you can also find right here. And then you can see her website at murals.design. So those are the kind of different ways of how you can see Sandy's work. And obviously one of the most accessible one is through her Instagram account. So looking at it just right here, a series of images which are absolutely incredible. Out of all of them, my favorites are really the one with the dark background, like this snake here. I think it's absolutely beautiful. When you look at the image, when you see the level of details, the texture, the composition, it's just beautiful. It's really well done. Again, here another one with the frog, also so beautiful. And there is more and more. Sandy herself doesn't always see herself as a wildlife photographer. She says that she likes the challenge and she likes to try different things. However, I think you can see that definitely she has a talent for wildlife photography. The captures are incredible, beautiful, and super well done. It's a mixture of great photography technique, really good eye for composition, and then very careful but powerful editing. So Sandy, congratulations. Thank you very much for sharing the work, your incredible work with us, and well done. We can't wait to see more photos from you in upcoming months and hopefully years. So that's done. We have met Sandy, and same for all of you folks. If you want to join us, if you want to become our photographer of the week, all you need to do is to head to our website cleverphotographer.com/review, and that's where you can find the upcoming dates and links where you can upload your photos, and maybe next week I'm gonna be talking about you. So that's that out of the way. Now let's jump into the reviewing. And here we are with the first part of the show, where we're going to be looking at landscape photographers. Now we have 13 landscape photographers to look at, so lots of work, so let's jump straight into it. But before we're going to do that, just a quick reminder to make sure that you like this video, that you comment below, and also subscribe to our channel so we can keep creating content like this. So that's out of the way. Now let's jump into the reviewing. So starting with Ad here. Ad sent us 2 images this week, so let's have a look at them. Let's just bring this up and let's move right here. So we have this beautiful landscape with the stunning mountain at the back, and then similarly as well here, very kind of interesting framing. Both of them epic landscape. So let's have a look at the camera details first of all and start with that. So between the two, it looks like a same camera, same lens. We're talking about Fujifilm this time, and the lens 10-24, so very wide lens used for these images. Now when it comes to camera setting, ISO 200, 13.8 millimeters, so really wide, f16, 1/280th of a second. Looking at it from this kind of point of view, and I don't know exactly the camera, but just a reminder, when it comes to ISO, number one, always as much as you can, if the gear allows you to, go to 100, especially when you're on kind of daylight situation like this, when there is no restriction with the amount of light coming into camera. Start by setting up your camera to 100. f16 also seems to be very high for this situation. I think f11 would be more than enough. You need to try the gear, but f11 should really do the job, especially when you have quite fast lens. With f11 you will still get as much details all the way through, and it will allow you again to work with the shutter speed and ISO to minimize it. Other than that, that's the kind of setting. Obviously 1/280th of a second to make sure that nothing looks overexposed, especially when you're shooting such a big dynamic range of colors with the white, blue, and then the foreground. You really want to make sure that you almost underexposed, and then you just push the exposure a little bit in post-processing to make sure that when you come home, you have all the details from the actual photo shoot. So looking at it like this, I just see few sensor dots here, which again come with the f16. Higher the f-stop, the number, more these things comes out. You can kind of see one here, one here, one here. Now there is a video in the description on how to remove them, but you can kind of see them a little bit with this thing here, but they are more visible without the actual visualizing spot. You can just see one here, and it really is a quick process of how you get rid of them. I know that the application called Luminar Neo has this actually built in, and I done a little bit of testing on it, and it does it automatically, and it does quite a good job at it. So maybe something to look at from you if you don't want to do it manually like this. Now let's move quickly just from what we see. The sharpness is very good here. Obviously lots of sharpness in the foreground here, and then pretty much all the way through the back to the mountains. So that is very well done. When we kind of zoom in like this, it's excellent. Now let's move to this image right here, and let's look at the setting here as well. So as I say, same camera, same lens. From your settings, still ISO 200, and it's maybe that your camera only does ISO 200. We have some members in past which is the case, so that's no problem. Just the goal is to minimize it as little as possible, which again with this kind of daylight situation should be no problem. f14, a little bit more manageable, and 1/100th of a second, again making sure that you get all the details in. When I kind of just jump in here and check your white spots, you need to make sure and keep an eye on this. You see everything what's not black is pretty much kind of clear white color, and when you print that, it ends up just as the color of the paper. So you always want to make sure that the whites are as managed as possible. Quite often you can just bring down the highlights a little bit and the whites sorts themselves. Let me just check. So like this, and it can be easily checked. So it's not necessary that you overexpose the photo. It's just during the editing, it's something to kind of keep an eye on. Again, looking at it like this, obviously the light is kind of full on, probably midday or definitely full on daylight, with lots of kind of strong light coming here, kind of harsher, darker shadows here, and then lots of light on the mountains. I don't mind it on the mountain as much because it actually creates very nice contrast. It's just the foreground, there is a lot happening when it comes to contrast of the colors and shades and so on. Now sticking here, since we're here already and talking about composition. Now, this one I really like when it comes to composition, because I think the path actually creates a very nice kind of flow. The V shape creates a very nice framing for the mountain afterwards. So I think that works very well too. Obviously, there's a touch of unbalance, and that's just me really being picky, where you have this kind of ending at this spot and this going all the way up, but there's probably not much you could have done with it, so it's still fine. Again, looking at it just kind of closer, again, lots of kind of sensor dust poking out, where when you take such a beautiful photo, it's a shame that these are left behind, because they can be really easily fixed and they improve the photo immediately. Talking about composition here, I think it's nicely done too. You know, there is some foreground obviously created with the river and stones, creating really nice entrance to the flow. The depth is also very nicely represented with the stones and with the different layers of the rock all the way at the back. This one, when it comes to balance of the composition, it's much better done. You see, so there is a little bit of space here, and suddenly when you look at it, it kind of creates really nice balance pointing towards the center and towards the mountain, where I think this framing is much more interesting, much more kind of dramatic, but then the fact that this part is above just creates it a little bit, makes it a little bit unbalanced. And then once we here, let's talk about post-processing. Well, from what you have, obviously this, if it would be late in the afternoon, if you could have been there and there would be a little bit of texture in the sky and a little bit of more diffused warm light, it would have been another level of image, but I still think it's very well captured. It's a very natural edit to it. One thing I would keep an eye on is this kind of blue shade almost leaking inside of the mountain, which is completely normal. Most camera do that, and you just want to always keep an eye on it, with maybe just double checking with your auto on a white balance and seeing where you are there. Another good thing with the snow is to use the picker and actually click on the snow and see what it does to you, if it helps. So when you look at it, it's 23 plus 4 plus 23 plus 4. Obviously you don't want all of this to be so yellow, so you can just return this and then you can do a really quick local adjustment. So I think it was 23 or 24 and plus 4, and now you just want to make sure, let's do this. So 4, what you want to make sure is that you have the settings right. You want to auto mask, and then you just want to brush on the actual mountain. So that way you remove the kind of blue color which gets leaked from the sky. And we can do that on this part as well. So we remove it a little bit from the mountain, and the rest of the picture stay natural. So that's a little tip on how to make sure that the snow keeps its nice natural white color. Also, what would really help here would be a little vignette. You can either use the effects and bring down the vignette here to do something like this, or you can again use the local adjustments. You can create new mask, use the radial gradient, actually point it where you want the center of the gradient. So it's this case here, and then you just invert the gradient and bring down the exposure. So it does something like this. So that's about it. Very similarly on this one, you want to make sure that the white balance is correct here. So we can do that the same way. We go to color, you use the picker, you just find out if it kind of needs any adjustments there. 11 and 7, but that's really kind of yellow, but at least a little bit. I think brush, let's see if we do 11 and 7 here, and again we just paint on the mountain itself, so that way we don't edit anything else, but we keep the mountain in a nice natural color. So something like this. Similarly, again, another mask, radial gradient, and creating nice vignette in this part of the image. So something like this, and that's about it. After that, I would just keep an eye on the sensor dust, and there you have it. So thank you again for sharing beautiful images with us. It's a pleasure to see them, pleasure to review them. Stay safe and send us more pictures as soon as you can. Moving on, the next photographer, we have Alex and his 2 images. Alex, let's have a look what we have here, 1 and 2. So let's move to the actual editing panel here and let's have a look at it. So looking at it, first of all, from the technical point of view, we're looking at the camera settings. We have a Canon 6D Mark II. The lens was 24-105 f4. And then from the camera settings, you were on ISO 100, 60mm f7.1, 1/320th of a second. So as the camera setting goes, that is it's perfect. That's exactly the settings you want to put into your camera when you want the best performance out of your lens and camera, the least noise, and get detail all the way through for a landscape. So excellent there. Obviously, I'm not 100% sure if the sky was like this or not, because I think the white balance is a little bit off on the two different parts, but it's still a very epic landscape with lots of nice things. Obviously, there is a kind of sharpness through with a little bit of softness on this part, so maybe a little bit of post-processing done into it. However, looking at it like this, technically I think it's quite well done. Looking at this image and looking at your camera again, we are on same camera, if I'm right. However, different lens, this time 70 to 200. Now the settings were ISO 100, 70mm, f7.1, 1/320th of a second. So similarly, spot on settings, well done, and then the result is also very cool. Obviously, a little bit harsher light. You can see the shadows being really dark. You can also see them here really dark and here really dark, but however, lots of texture, lots of details, and other than the light, I think technically quite well done. I love the colors. It's the depth is quite nicely done as well, created with these foreground layers. So all in all, quite nice capture, Alex. When it comes to composition, to be honest, there is a lot happening. And you kind of for a moment wonder what is the main subject, what is it you're trying to really show us, because there's a lots of kind of different colors, textures, and different things all together. You're thinking, is it about the river, is it about these mountains? So it's just a lot happening, that's all, and that is not very easily recognizable main subject. If anything, I would probably crop it a little bit down, because I think this part there is not completely necessary, and that way we bring more focus to these rocks and to the river. So I would probably end up with something like this. If you wouldn't want it as panoramatic, I think you could also crop it like this, and then maybe get something like this. It, based on my opinion, would be a little bit cleaner. Now looking at this image right here and talking about composition, I quite like the foreground, creating quite nice flow. This kind of little hut and the woods also help us with a little bit of the scale, so I think that works quite nicely too. The proportion between the sky and the mountain is okay. I probably would have gone either way, maybe more sky and less landscape, or the other way around. Just depends on what you prefer. You could probably go for something like this and just get as much powerful image, so you would end up with something like this. Now that's a kind of trick we're very working with the thirds, and basically quite often something what creates really nice and strong composition is to have a 1/3 of a sky, 2/3 of the ground, or 2/3 of a sky and 1/3 of a ground. And it really depends on what is the main subject and what you're trying to show. So in this case, I would probably go on for something like this, more happening at the same spot, so it's a little bit more powerful, and the sky, there's still plenty of it, so I think like this it would be even cooler. When we talk about post-processing, as I say on the beginning, I'm not sure about the white balance. I think there's a lots of kind of yellow, greeny. I wonder what the auto would do. I think maybe a little bit of the cool actually really helps, because it creates a little bit of temperature contrast between the land and the sky, where when it's all back, it's kind of all a little bit flat because it's a similar color. So maybe something like this would make it quite cool. Other than that, maybe a little vignette always go a long way, and the rest I would leave. Now, talking about this one, just making sure that everything is nice and straight. I wonder if it could get a little bit of maybe a tilting to get something like this, or more, doesn't really matter. And with this picture, you just really want to create contrast with some local adjustment, with really simple dodge and burn, I think. So you can just use a brush right here, and maybe just bringing the exposure down a little, and brush on the areas which you want to make a little bit more contrasty, so maybe the foreground and so on. And then you want to similarly create another brush and do the opposite, actually add some exposure and create some highlights at certain parts of the image. So that way you kind of create and emphasize a little bit the contrast and add a little bit more drama to your images. Alex, thank you very much for sending us your photos. Stay safe and make sure you send us more images in the near future. Moving on the next photographer, let's see where we got here. We are going to look at, one second. We are going to look at Dave. Dave, we have 2 images from you. So let's have a look what we have. So kind of portrait pictures with including the photographers in it, which I think it's a very smart way to kind of push the scale feeling of the image. This way the goat hiding here is also really, really cool. I'm not 100% sure if goat was there or no, or the eagle was there, but it's still quite nicely done and it's a lovely, lovely idea. Now talking about this one, the photographer I think was here standing and shooting, again helping with the scale and opening the scene all together. Let's have a look. We can jump into the technical details here, and this one was captured with the iPhone, and this one too. Oh, well done. That's a great job with the iPhone. Let's have a look. When it comes to mobile phones and the settings, it works a little bit differently than on your DSLR or mirrorless camera. So the numbers are not as telling as when I look at the regular photo. However, just kind of looking at it from this point of view, the ISO was 20, f2.4, 1/220th of a second. Lots of details kind of all the way through. I'm not 100% sure if the sky was there like this or if the star ray or starburst was there like this, or sunburst. However, still very powerful. When it comes to the details, I mean, this part is sharp. This is a little bit soft for me. There is again sharpness, and then there is a little bit of softness through. So a lot happening, lots put together. There is also a little bit of chromatic aberration here. It's just the phone cameras are incredible. They can take incredible pictures, but when they hit certain limit, when it comes to dynamic range, when it comes to the light range, it's just they kind of hit a level where they start to create lots of unnecessarily kind of mistakes. And in this case, you can see, so there is the chromatic aberration, there is the kind of softness in this case, there's a little bit of noise, there is a little bit of white balance here. So as far as this goes, it goes nicely. However, when you look at it like this as a whole photo, it's a very, very nice capture. So still well done. Again here, I'm not sure what's this black mark here. I don't know if you kind of forget to edit it or if there is a purpose for that. It's similarly here as well. Looking at it like this, the sharpness is in it as well, so that's quite impressive. The depth of the field is here as well because of the, obviously this in foreground, that in the background. The sky is quite impressive. I think sometimes when we learn how to add things to the image, we keen to overdo it, and I think this is maybe a little bit on the edge of it, where obviously maybe the photographer would have been enough, or photographer and an eagle, but you had a photographer, eagle and the goat, and then you change the sky. So it's just a lot happening, and some of it is a little bit visible. So that again, when we stick to the composition, so nice framing, nice V-shape, this creating very nice depth of field. The person there, very nice as well, again, helping with the composition, adding a sense of scale, which is always helpful. The flow with the river is very, very nice too. The sky at the top works very nice. I think maybe you could kind of lose part of the image. I don't think it needs to be as high. I think if you would go probably as high as this, it would have been enough. It still creates exactly the same result. What I think more here needs to be worked on is the kind of blending and the use of these elements, and also making sure that you don't leave behind anything like this to kind of distract the viewer from looking at the image. Again, here talking about composition, again, quite nicely done. I wish the person is a little bit more further. Anytime you kind of talk about these kind of elements, you want them more involved in the center of the image. Other than that, the flow obviously with the river is lovely. The sky here is lovely too. Obviously, kind of looking at it from a realistic point of view, you can clearly see that the sun is hitting into the mountain here, yet on the picture you added the sun here, so it's not very realistic even from this point of view. And even somebody who doesn't really understand photo editing would be able to figure it out, because his mind would telling me that something isn't right here. So just something to think of. And then then that's it. Yeah. So that's where I would leave it. Well, in post-processing, I think both of them need a little bit of work. I think this one less. I think this one is better done. This one I think needs a little bit more work and really kind of think about these elements, and when you add them, see how you could make it a little bit more realistic and believable. Anyway, Dave, thank you so much for sending us your photos. It was a pleasure to look at them and review them. Stay safe, and if you have more, make sure you send them to us soon. Moving on the next photographer, we have a Doug. Doug, we have not two images. We have a raw file, and then we have the image. Obviously, the Tower Bridge in London, incredible capture of it with a beautiful long exposure sunset sky, excellent level of details in a lamppost, just very nice combination of different things all together, beautiful colors as well. So all in all put together, well done. So let's have a look at the technical details. So again, Sony a7R II, and from the camera setting, ISO 100, f11, 15-second exposure and 30 millimeters on your lens. So as a camera setting goes, it's spot on. Obviously, you want to stick to f11. You get this little nice starburst, and I already wrote somewhere, I believe, that I am not the biggest fan of the starbursts because I think they overdone quite often. I think lots of people just push the f-stop to f16 and or higher, and then they get these lots of huge starbursts, and I think they really take lots of attention away. But I think in your case, this actually works quite nice. It's very small. I love the level of detail inside of the lamppost that I think works very well, and it's just very well done. And then we look at the details on the bridge. We look at the sky. It's just a beautiful photo and beautiful capture of London. Talking about composition, I think it's quite nicely done. Obviously, when we look at the image before, and I know the location, I know the spacing is a little bit limited there, and what you put together, I think it works very well. It's nicely done with how you say, with the geometry. I think it's all sorted. This creates actually very nice depth, creating and filling up empty negative space. And then obviously the main subject is clear there. So also with the shot that does the back, it's a combination of everything you know London about, put nicely there. The bridge is there, everything what needs to be there. So I think as a composition goes, excellent and well done. And then we move to the post-processing, and post-processing this is definitely my style. Absolutely loving the saturation, the drama, the golden glow, the mix of the kind of warm at the back and blue colors together, I think works very nicely too. The level of detail, the long exposure, just all together put together, I think creates excellent result and a beautiful image. So Doug, well done. Congratulations on the timing and on the capture. I think it's beautiful and you should be really proud of yourself. So thank you for sharing it with us. As always, stay safe and make sure you send us more pictures soon. Moving on the next photographer, we have a Doug Wallace. We have two images here, and I have to say, when I first saw them, I was really impressed. Not only that they are great pictures, but I really love the composition. I think it's something a little bit different. I think here in the church with the person, I think that really works. It's a beautiful image. And this one, again, just a gorgeous image with the really smart use of the water and a reflection here. So very well done there. And let's have a look if we have the camera details on those. So this is with captured with camera Sony a7R Mark IV. The lens was 16-35. And when it comes to camera setting on this one, ISO 200, 16 millimeters, so as wide as humanly possible, and f4 with 1/160th of a second. So looking at it like this, probably a little bit less light in these conditions. So the ISO 200 kind of makes sense. f4, so again, probably less light, so to kind of push it down, and 1/160th of a second to make sure that you get the kind of details and color all the way through. So when it setting goes, I think it's quite nicely done. Obviously with 1/160th of a second, you also get the person being nice and sharp, which is excellent. And looking at it like this, I quite like the kind of softness in the foreground. I think that creates really nice depth. The sharpness on the building is excellent. And again, the sharpness on the person is also very well done. I quite like the blown out sky. I think that works quite nicely too. And the contrast between the warmth of this and the black and white or monotone here, I think that really works. I think that's very well done together, and congratulations, Doug. And moving on, this one, so it doesn't say which camera was it, but I would assume it's a similar camera to the one before. Obviously shooting inside, so and a cathedral, which I've been doing lately a lot. And kind of more complicated light conditions there. So ISO 640, 16 millimeters, f2.8, 1/100 of a second. Now, as much as we do most of the British cathedral, and in France as well, to be honest, do not allow tripods in, so really something to kind of look out on, and then you just have to work in your favor. So the sharpness is here as well. I wonder if it was a single image or if you captured multiple images to get the kind of details in. The details here are beautiful, and I love the details in the glass. The light rail here, I think, also works very nicely, really creating just a beautiful image altogether. This is beautiful. So moving to the composition with this one, I think it's well thought, well executed, and beautiful. I love how you kept all this in a frame. I think quite often I see frames being, just the framing seems to be one of the most difficult things. Framing and composition, you know, lots of people are technically well skilled and they can do editing well, but I think the framing really makes the image, and in this case I think it's just smart. And again, the kind of bright and kind of virtual view here is beautiful. And this, again, like I mentioned right on the beginning, I think it's a really smart way to show something which was probably moody day, kind of very obstructed building. So I think the person helps us with the scale, which is brilliant. The reflection creates a very powerful composition. Then you play with the saturation, which is also very smart. And the kind of minimal white sky, I think, again, creates very nice contrast at the back of the building. So all in all, Doug, both of them beautiful images. Same on the photo processing, which I kind of already went through when I was doing the composition. Just very well done, very powerful, very dramatic. Use of kind of more modern techniques, which I think really work. So well done, great images. Congratulations, and that's it. If you have more pictures, make sure you send them to us in the future, and until next time, take care. Okay, and it's time to look at another photographer. This time we look at Gloria. So Gloria, we have two black and white images right here. So let's look at them. Let's jump straight into it. Let's have a look at your camera details first. So this one was with the iPhone, and this one Nikon Z6. So let's have a look at it. Starting with the iPhone, just to kind of let you know, when it comes to iPhone and the camera settings, it works a little bit differently than your regular DSLR or mirrorless camera. So it's not as stelling. However, still, it was Apple iPhone 6, ISO 32, 4.2 millimeters, f2.2, 2800 of a second. So just looking at it like this and looking at the level of the detail, sadly, even though it's quite a big image, some parts look a little bit soft, but I don't think it's necessarily the sharpness of the image. It could be the transition into the JPEG who does that. There's fair bit of noise and some kind of artifacts in the sky which could be created by the phone, or maybe you done a little bit of sky replacement, which I don't think necessarily is the case. It's just maybe when you do the editing, it kind of pushes these things out a little bit. Quite like the contrast, I quite like the light, I like the transition to black and white. I think it works very nice, creating quite nice scenes. So technically I think this is quite nicely done, with a little bit more what we call harsh light, with obviously creating these kind of shadows which can get really dark and distracting. However, still quite nicely done. Now then, moving on this image, we are with Nikon Z6, 24-70 is the lens, and then the settings ISO 100, 41mm f8 1/50th of a second. Now this setting is spot on exactly for this kind of scene. No immediate foreground elements, so no need for a large f-stop. So I think 7.1 or 8 is a good choice. ISO 100, definitely trying to avoid any additional color or grain noise, and then the 1/50th of a second is about as far as you can go when you handheld the camera, so I think that's a good choice too. Lots of drama, obviously quality wise, this is much better, much cleaner, much sharper, and for example, just kind of looking at the gradient in the sky, you can see how it's very natural here and very smooth, and then you look at here and you see how you're getting these kind of elements. So that's the kind of thing you get with the phones. I think phones these days can take incredible images until you push them to certain limit, and after that they just kind of really start to introduce lots of different artifacts. Another thing with the phones is usually when they take the image and you kind of share it right away, it's quite good. When you try to post-process it in things like Snapseed or Lightroom, quite often by pushing the editing, again, you introduce kind of additional elements to it. So, but still, both of them very powerful. This one, obviously great. So sticking with this one and talking about the kind of artistic part and composition, I think it's very, very well done. Looking at it, when it comes to framing, I just wish this would kind of have been left all there. I'm huge about the different kind of parts and always things that it's a shame when obviously this is a very significant part of the image, setting the scene for this kind of Wild West country land. So you just want it all there. That would be one thing I would kind of have to add. Then the building, I think, works very nicely. You always want to double check the geometry, especially when a building is your main subject. So you can do that simply here by using the auto, and that just shift it a little bit and create this great scene. I think the sky with lots of details at the backs works very nicely too. So all in all, great composition, well done. Moving on this one, as a composition goes, again, I would just double check the geometry, making sure I have everything sorted. I think if the auto doesn't work, we can use this kind of guided lines, and just again, making sure that the building is kind of nice and straight. Once we do that, we can kind of just shift it around a little bit. If we can crop it just a little, then I think we can go even lower and probably get something like this. So this is where I would go. Other than that, I think the tree is very, very nice here. The building is nice. I wonder if you could have gone slightly more towards the right and get more of the front of the building, but still the frame created with the tree actually works very well here, and it's nicely done. Now when it comes to post-processing, I'm a huge fan of black and white photography. I think this one is just a slight touch over the board, creating lots of contrast between the bright and dark areas. It's not badly done, but maybe it's already with the original photo, which was probably really bright with lots of kind of sun and contrast between the light. And again, the sky is a little bit visible. Other than that, I think it really works. Obviously, you could add one more vignette at this part of the image because that's your main subject. Really kind of pushing it to something like this, and leave it there. So that way you really focus just on the building and everything else kind of stay a little bit hidden. On this one, I think the gradient from the bottom, the gradient from the top, the nice contrast, nice texture, it's excellent. Gloria, well done on both of them. This one a little bit nicer than the first one, but knowing that the first one was captured with the mobile phone, it's excellent. Thank you, well done. Stay safe, and if you have more images, make sure you send this to us in the near future. Moving on the next photographer, we have pictures from John Lester, and we'll look at them right now. John, let's have a look what we have. First, looking at your camera. So this one is a Nikon D7100. This one is Nikon D90. So looking at it like this, looking at this one, for example, the camera settings, ISO 400, f4.5, 1/80th of a second. So quite good setting, obviously lower light situation right here inside of the building. So ISO 400, how much noise did it really give us? A little bit. I mean, usually more noticeable in the darker parts when you kind of open them. It's doable. I mean, there's still lovely details in, so well done there. F4.5, obviously trying to have it as fast as possible, but still creating quite nice sharpness. And when 180, I have to say I'm quite impressed that the sharpness on the people stayed even with 180. However, still quite well done. So I think technically speaking, it's lovely. You know, nothing you could do. You could obviously have a tripod here and try to see if you can maybe then lower the shutter speed, but then the people would start to be blurry and so on. So very well done there. And moving on this one, so we were with our Nikon D90. Now the settings here were ISO 800, 18mm, f5.6, 1/10 of a second. It's a right time of the day. I really like that. I really like the kind of golden thing coming in and the light starting to come up. I think we talk more about this one during the composition, but at the time of the day is good. Shame there is no texture in the sky, but still very well done. The noise coming up here much more than on the previous image. You can kind of really see it when you zoom in here, the level of noise. Quite often when the noise starts to hit certain limits, it also starts to remove the sharpness from the image, as you can see on these parts. Especially in the kind of darker parts, you can kind of see it a lot. However, still, all in all, looking at it like this, it's kind of sharp. It's a lovely framing, good time of the day, and a good capture. Moving on and talking about the composition on this one. Now, I love the view. I love the kind of skyscrapers here, and I love the foreground. My only shame, and I know you will know already what I'm going to mention, are these cars here. Not only the fact that they have cut, also the fact that they cannot there. I think if they wouldn't be there, it would make so much cleaner composition altogether. So that's just a big shame, because I think it's so pretty. Obviously, one option could be that you would kind of crop them away and then you get something like this, but it's not as powerful as this. So shame, you maybe have to go back if it's somewhere where you live and try to reshoot it, because it's just they take away the rest of it is so carefully framed and well done. Just these two cars really take the attention away. Now on this one, I'm a big fan of passages and taking pictures of them, but I really think the beauty of these kind of buildings are in the symmetry. So this is where I would have suggested you for next time to be in a center, shoot directly straight on, and you will really emphasize and bring up the beauty of these kind of shapes being equal and balanced on each side, the signs, the statues, the clock. I think it would work so much better in this case. Technically, there is not really much done, not much wrong. Obviously, there are geometry is quite well done here. It's all there. There's a lovely glow on it. Also, one thing you would kind of wish that the place would be a little bit less busy. I think the people take away lots of attention. Also because they're not 100% sharp. So, you're kind of looking at that a little bit. So there are two main things I would be kind of suggesting for next time. Trying to be a little bit more patient and wait if there is a less busy moment. And second one is to shoot it directly straight onto the wall, because specifically in these types of building, I think the geometry really help in overall. Now, when it comes to post-processing, again, I would just double check to make sure that everything is nice and straight with the auto geometry here. And I think, again, when we're in these passages, the vignette goes a long way because it really guides your eyes through the building itself. Always double check the white balance, making sure that you kind of nice and natural, which you pretty much are, so it's not a big deal. And then a little bit of kind of brightness, I think, and a little bit of local adjustments would do a lot here. On this one, I think post-processing is very well done. I think the lights really come out. There is a lovely contrast, a lovely natural white balance, the highlights and shadows. The shadows could open a little bit more, I think, just for the details on these buildings. But other than that, it's great. This is beautiful, beautiful image. Just really a shame for the cars. So all in all, John, thank you very much for sharing the two pictures with you. I hope I give you a few handy tips. Take care, stay safe, and send us pictures as soon as you can. So that brings us to Lieve. Lieve, we have two images here, and they are both autumn captures. So I wonder, I think if I'm right, you're from Australia, but maybe I'm wrong, so I'm sorry about that. So I wonder if maybe autumn is coming to you right now. Let's see if we have any map here. It doesn't really say where it's Quebec. So Canada, am I right? Let me see before I say something which doesn't make sense. Quebec, yeah, Canada. So autumn in Canada, but I assume maybe now you have a similar season like us, maybe winter. However, still beautiful two images, lovely saturation, lovely colors. So let's talk about them. Let's look at it. Both of them captures with the iPhone, so very impressive. Obviously, again, I will repeat myself today. Today we have lots of mobile phone reviews. The settings on the camera in the mobile phone are a little bit different than they would be in DSLR or mirrorless. So in this case, it's ISO 25, f1.8, 1/340th of a second, and pretty much the same setting right here, ISO 25, f1.8, 1/230th of a second. So let's talk about the technical kind of point of view. Everything is nice and sharp as much as it can be for the size of the image. There's a lovely details in the sky, which I think is very pretty. Again, the colors are very nice. The light is a little bit harsh, but not too much. I think the colors really take away lots of that and make it really work nicely. So technically, I think very well captured. On this one, there is a little sense of softness in it, especially when you look at the actual trees and whatever is background. Also, these leaves, they just kind of melt together a little bit. So I think that's to do with the fact that maybe this was a little bit darker scene. However, still very, very pretty. Again, the light and color, more diffuse light here, which I think works quite nicely, bringing different shadows and different colors out and put together, I think, very, very well done. Now, talking about composition, this one I think works very well. So you have the sky, and then obviously you're focusing on these. I would probably crop the bottom part. I don't think it necessarily needs to be there all the way. I would have done something like this, and let's see if you could push it this way. So that way you have this as your kind of main element and main subject, or I wonder if you could have done it the other way around, if you could do something like this. Yeah, just kind of different things to play with, simply because I think otherwise there is a lot happening. So you're just not 100% sure about what, some kind of order on it. I know you're trying to show the colors of the autumn, but you just kind of want to pick something what the human eyes can focus on. And obviously with this amount of trees here and nothing here, it's kind of a little bit unbalanced. So it's just something to kind of think of. Either way, it's very pretty. I love the contrast with the background, love the colors, love it all. Now this one, obviously there is a kind of hope for the path, which could create nice flow, but I'm not 100% sure if it's working like that, because obviously you just see it disappearing there. The colors are nice, the contrast is nice. It's again, like you're looking at it and you're thinking, what is it she's trying to show? Is it the autumn colors? Then I don't think you need all the path around it, or is it the path and is it kind of, so there is kind of fair bit of happening, and it's sometimes really good and important to pick a focal point and use it as a main subject for something, so then you can create more powerful composition. When it comes to post-processing, I love them all. Bright, colorful, good white balance, good saturation, just nicely put together. This one I would probably push the exposure just a touch, maybe add a little vignette to it just to kind of close it and create a little bit of attention to the center. And all in all, just very well done. Lieve, thank you so much for sharing your photos with us. It's always great pleasure to review them. Stay safe, and if you have more pictures, make sure you send them to us as soon as you can. Which brings us to the next photographer, Martin. Martin, one photo from you this week, this kind of sunset picture right here with a really kind of big panorama image. So let's look at it. Let's see if we have any camera details, and we do. So it's a Canon 5D Mark II you used. The lens is 24 millimeters. So this must be panorama. You must have put pictures together on this one. However, from the settings, ISO 100, f10, 1/400th of a second. So looking at it like this, first of all, starting with the technical part of the image, the camera settings is spot on. Obviously this time of the day, ISO 100 is the golden goal, so you right there. F10 is probably quite realistic for this, kind of lots happening on the image. You want to keep everything nice and sharp, so quite well done there. And 1/400th of a second, we talking exposure here. Obviously it will kind of freeze the water, which creates lots of texture in the foreground. However, I think it works quite nicely. Now, there's a lot happening there. I assume there was some kind of sky replacement done here, and I tell you why it's visible, because first you have these kind of glows only on certain parts of image, and then you have the kind of shadows here as well. Then you have like a boat or something here. I'm not sure what this element exactly is, but it's kind of half visible. It's more transparent. And then also, when you look at it like this, when you can kind of zoom in, it seems that the sun is coming more from here. So I think the sun, maybe like here, the sun's coming from here, where on your picture, the sun is all the way at the back. So just something to kind of check when it comes to being realistic. Now, I think, let me just make sure that my monitor is bright. I think it could get a little bit more brightness, specifically for kind of these parts, making sure that everything is nice. I'm a huge fan of vignetting myself, but you can double check yourself always with the vignetting when you zoom out yourself a little. And if you see completely black corners, that's when you overdone it. So just something to double check. So I think this is where these parts are just a little bit touch too much. So that's about the technical part. Now, composition, I think it's beautiful. I think it's really, really well done. There's a lot happening, and I really like that on the panoramas. There's lots of panoramas. There's just one piece of nothing happening, where this is super cool. You have people swimming, then you have the hotel, then you have a center part, then you have the pier, then you have the back, you have the sun and the sky behind it. I think really as a composition and artistic idea, it's brilliant. I think it's great. That is, everywhere the viewer look on the picture, there is something happening, and you could really spend some time looking around and seeing what's happening on it. So well done there. So that nicely brings us to the post-processing, and that's where I think you need to, first of all, trying to keep everything as realistic as possible. That's a number one. So this is where really big selection of skies comes in. Sometimes I spend half an hour on switching different skies, seeing what works, and you cannot keep changing them. And when you find the right sky, you just know. You know immediately. You don't need to do anything else, because the right sky just fit with the rest of the image, and it really blends together. Where you kind of try to put something what doesn't belong there, you kind of keep looking. So that would be one thing. Second thing is obviously the vignette. That would be another bit I would kind of keep an eye on. And then these kind of glows. So on another bit you could kind of have a look. Other than that, Martin, it's an epic scene, lots happening there, beautifully put together, especially for a panorama. So a few things to kind of think of, few things to implement, and definitely keep doing what you're doing, because it's just very, very powerful, the idea and the image. So Martin, thank you for sharing the image with us. Stay safe, and if you have more images, make sure you send them to us in the near future. And it's time to look at another photographers. This time we're looking at Melissa and two images from her. So let's jump to it. Let's have a look at the camera settings first of all. This one is Nikon D7100 with 55 to 200 millimeters. And looking at it like this, ISO 100, f11, 1/200th of a second, 165 millimeters. So looking at it like this, quite nice scene with the horses. Now, when I zoom in, not that much, but when I zoom into something like this, there is a little bit of softness on them. Now, nothing what couldn't be fixed in something like a topaz sharpen. However, obviously, the framing, shame that there is a cut off, and they are just touch soft, so not 100% sharp. Still very nice scene with a lovely light. Obviously, the tree and the composition is lovely here. However, the sharpness, even with 1 to 200th of a second. I wonder maybe the lens maybe moved a touch. Still, when it comes to that, I think that's one bit of a shame. Now, talking about this one and looking again at the settings, so Nikon Z7 and the lens was Nikon 24 to 70, and from the settings ISO 100, so that's a spot on 24mm kind of classic 24mm capture, and f16 1/60th of a second. So lots happening on the image. I think the ISO is fine, 24mm is fine. F16 again, unless there was kind of artistic reason why going for f16, I always try to suggest to stick more like f11 because f16 brings lots of sensor dust and a noise, and sometimes it can kind of create softness depending on the gear really, but just kind of as much as you can, unless you're doing some kind of long exposure or you need to work with the light, f16 is a little bit high for me. However, just whatever you think. Looking at it like this, 1/60th of a second again is a good speed for being handheld, so that's good. Now looking at this from this point of view, there is again lots happening. So there's sharpness all the way here. There's some there is some fog happening right here and kind of mist. Then there is another kind of mist or clouds in a kind of gray color here, so that's something a little bit different. And then we have blue skies with the white clouds at the back. So kind of just zooming in, it's just different levels of the image. The sharpness is there. The exposure is good. The depth is there as well, obviously having a really strong foreground here with the kind of valley going in the different parts. I think that works quite nicely too. Just really your eyes kind of get really move around the picture. So with that, we can kind of jump into the artistic part where we talk about the composition, where I think the valley itself works very nicely. That's a lovely idea, but I think this part just takes lots of attention away and creates a little bit unbalanced composition. So just something to kind of think of when you're looking at it like this. One way to kind of go for it would be to crop it just a little bit differently. You could do it like this and then really keep the valley on one side and have the trees on the other. Another option would be to kind of get radius of the trees altogether to get more something like this, and maybe put the valley in the center, get radius of the bottom a bit, and maybe get something like this. So suddenly you kind of take that busyness away and really focus on the valley with a beautiful kind of flow in it. So that's just one thing you could do with it. Let me see just to make sure I bring it back to what it was, and that's about it. Other than that, I mean, it's a beautiful scene. Obviously a lot's happening, the mist, the kind of trees and the colors and the just very pretty, very powerful. Just kind of different things you could kind of try for the next time. Where on this one, I think the composition is very nice, except the fact that he's losing the tail here. That I think is always a little bit shame, specifically when you have them as being the main subject. You really want them all in frame and in the composition. Other than that, I think again the tree creating a really nice focal point with the horses around them. The light is nice. The fact that some of them looking at you works quite nicely. A little bit of foreground here, just creating a depth. So all in all, like this, I think quite nicely done. So then put it together and look at the post-processing. Double check your white balance. So always with auto, obviously not that cold, but maybe just not as warm. And then a little bit push of the tint to get reduce of the overall green, I think is a good idea for this one. You could crop it a little bit tighter just to focus more on the horses, so you get something like this, and then you can always add little vignette just to kind of close the whole picture all together. But I think on this one the picture is beautiful like this. It's very natural. It's just making sure that everything is in frame and keep an eye on the sharpness is the key. Where on this one there's a lots of kind of blue happening here, so let's double check the white balance here again, and I think this is more kind of true white balance of it. I wouldn't warm it up as much. What I would do is I would adjust the back maybe locally with the brush. So just bring up the warmness and just brush the back there. So you get something like this, maybe not as warm, but just a little bit would be a good way to go. Obviously, adding a vignette is always a good idea. Just kind of closing the scene all together. And then you can do a lot with the local adjustments, like a little bit of dodge and burn. So you can start by creating one brush where you bring down the exposure. I usually try to stay above minus 0.4 because I think after that it gets a little bit unnatural, but 0.283 works very nicely. And I just kind of create different layers of a contrast, and then I create another one, and this way I go above. So I'll go again somewhere around 2.8 and just kind of brush on different parts, making sure that auto mask is off so it works, and then doing something like this. So that's about it, Melissa. Both of them, clearly you have a very good eye for composition and for a subject. So this one technically needed just a little bit help. And this one just kind of crop different things together and keeping an eye because it's a lot happening on the same scene. So you want to just keep it a little bit more direct and clean. That way you create a little bit more impact. Anyway, Melissa, stay safe. Thank you very much. If you have more images, make sure you send them to us soon. Which brings us to Mike. Mike, one picture from you, however, very crisp, beautiful sunset here. Let's have a look at it. Looking at the camera details, so Canon 5D, ISO 215mm, f4.5, 1/80th of a second. So 1/80th of a second, obviously creating this kind of still frozen effect on the waves, which is a little bit of a shame. I mean, this with a little bit of long exposure and smoothness on the water, I think that would really push it forward. ISO 200 is, yeah, you know, depending on what was your camera possibility at that moment. Obviously with this kind of dark thing, there won't be much noise, I think. And 4.5, yeah, working around with the shutter speed in a combination, that's what you have to do. What really works here, I think, is the composition. I think that's so powerful. I think lots of photographers are scared of this kind of direct, straight on composition, but I think it can create a really beautiful scene, especially when you get this very balanced and even subject. So obviously you have the same kind of texture and same elements on each side, creating a lovely reflection. I think then it's really powerful. So very well done there. One thing I noticed is the chromatic aberration, which you obviously get from the lens, especially when you shooting something as dynamic as this. And you can see it, for example, here, usually comes as purple and green. I see a little bit of the purple here. Let's see if it's kind of visible somewhere else. Not necessarily as much, it's just that bit there and maybe a little bit on here. I can also see a little bit of it here, but no green, I just see purple. So there is actually a really fun way removing it now in a Lightroom. It used to be just one kind of option. You would go into the optics and you would click on remove chromatic aberration, which does little bit of a job, but most of the time it didn't really remove anything. However, they added a new kind of option here which called diffringe, and basically you just have the two different colors you use for you get when you have the chromatic aberration, purple and green. And you just click on purple, you click on this little eye drop button and you find the purple, you click on that and you see one click and it's gone. And most of the time it's gone from the whole image, and that's it, you know, just two clicks, very powerful. I don't see the green, so I don't worry about it too much. I mean, when I really zoom in, you can see a little bit here. So let's just kind of turn to green here. Let's highlight the green and let's remove it like this. That's it, much cleaner. So that's done, that's done. Now let's move into the composition, which I already talked about, how powerful is it and everything. And I think when you get this symmetry, you really want to make it as symmetric as possible. So what I mean by that is that you want this pole to be in a center. So we can just double check the geometry here. Let's do that here. Let's make sure that everything is nice and straight. Well, sometimes it doesn't do the greatest job, and that's where we use the guided geometry. So we just use the horizon as our main kind of key. Then we want to make sure that this pole is nice and straight. So we would get something like this. And from then we go into the cropping and we just crop this part away to really get nice balance, I think. Something like this. You could remove a little bit of the top. You don't have to, but you could. and you would get something like this. So it's even more direct and more powerful. You have the pole in the center, everything else happening around it, and I think it's incredible. Post-processing is spot on here. Other than the chromatic aberration, I wouldn't add much to it. Beautiful work, Mike. Thank you very much for sending it over. Stay safe, and if you have more images, I would love to see them in the upcoming episodes. So moving on, the next photographer we have Pedro. Pedro, I have a look at some of your images last week. So if you don't see it here, just head to the last episode. And then I believe I also reviewed this image before. So we're gonna look at this picture right here. So kind of looking at your signature and looking at the style of the photography, I can see that you really like over-processed pictures with lots of special effects, pushing different things around, adding different skies, pushing the highlights, shadows. Nothing wrong about it. It's just I'm not the best person to really help you with that. Obviously, we can look at it, but there will be out of your kind of traditional photography, there will be lots of things really pushed, and I would pick up on them as being wrong. Still, kind of this was iPhone photo, ISO 1000, which generally is very, very high, although this is low light situation, so I understand that. f1.5, 1/9 of a second. So I assume the sky is replaced, which with the color balance doesn't really match the rest of the image. This is very kind of clean, white, cool color, and this is very warm, dark color. So looking at it like this and looking at the sky, which is very dark kind of blue, our dramatic image, and looking at the amount of light here, it's not very believable. So that would be my first thing. Next thing is when we talk about the composition, I think when building is your main subject, you really want to make sure that the building is geometrically well done. So you can just use the auto in geometry, so that way it's straight. And then I think one thing your image is missing for a composition is kind of foreground element. You have the building, which is kind of your main subject, but then you have lots of this, which you can't almost say what it is. So a little bit of work done there would be helpful. Post-processing is really pushed on, as I say. Personally, I have no problem with it. It's just it's a bit trickier for me to give you feedback on it. The sky, I think there are bits here where it's visible, so maybe you need to revisit it. And when you work with the sky, you need to even kind of apply the rest of the color to the rest of the image, and that's where I think this should be much warmer and just done a little bit differently. You could do a little bit of it here in Lightroom. You could select the sky, which takes just a second, and then you kind of invert the selections, and then you will be editing the rest of the image, and you can really add lots of purple to it, lots of gold to it, and then you really bring the exposure down. So when you do something like this, this is much more realistic and much more how the picture really should look to. Now we can also make it cooler the other way around and really just apply a little bit of warmth with the brush to the area where it should be warmer with the lights. So I think something like this, a much more what should happen and how it should look. Anyway, Pedro, thank you very much for sending your photos. I hope this was helpful. I hope it gives you a hint. You stay safe, keep editing, and send us more pictures next time. Which brings us to the last landscape photographer of the week, and we have a Peter here. So Peter, this very kind of desert scene with a lovely shape here and a very pretty sky at the back. And then we have this image right here with these kind of trees, again, probably in the middle of a desert or some kind of area like this. So let's have a look at it. Let's start with the camera details, which are not here. That's a little bit of a shame. So it's always helpful to have them so I can give you a little bit of more idea of what can be done differently. However, still looking at it like this, not as close, but like this, there's lots of texture happening here. Now, I'm not sure what exactly is happening in this area here. It's just like something is leaking into it from maybe a layer before or after, or maybe that's how it was. I'm not sure. It's kind of visible here. But still, the shape is nice. The light is quite impressive as well. Although the light on this foreground doesn't look very pink like the rest of the image there. So I'm not 100% sure if maybe the sky wasn't like this. Also seems that the sun is coming from here quite heavily, where in this case you have the kind of pink tame sky behind. So just something to kind of think of. Which brings me to the composition, where I think that's actually very well done. I love the kind of foreground creating the texture on the beginning. Then you have the shape here, which creating very nice flow. There is just enough sky, lots of things happening there with the tree, creating a nice scale in the composition. So I think as a composition goes, this is very, very well done. Where in this one, obviously the subject is clear here with these kind of trees, although again, lots happening. Something what we call high frequency texture in the foreground element, which sometimes it's a little bit distracting because it just makes the scene very busy. So I think that's a little bit of the case here. And I think most importantly, what's missing here is some kind of reference point for scale, because this could be this big or it could be 3 meters tall. And looking at it like this, because I never been there, I have no idea how tall it is. So it's just something to kind of think of for the future, for a composition, where here the trees give us a clear idea how big the dune was. Here, obviously, we just don't know. So just something to think of for the future. The sharpness is there, a little bit of a harsh light, creating this kind of harsh shadows and harsh shadows here. So something to kind of think of. Other than that, very, very well done. As a composition, I already talked about it. I would probably straighten it a little bit more. The subject is clear, trying to show this, still very well done and very well done here. Now, when it comes to post-processing, I would double check this part, just kind of double check what's happening here, why you have this kind of grainy part here. And I would double check with the sky, just kind of, you know, you have lots of brightness here and the dark part here, where here you have lots of brightness here and dark part here. So I'm just not 100% sure that it works. Other than that, maybe a little vignette is always a good idea for any image to close it up a little. And there you have it. On this one, much more natural, lots of yellow here. So maybe double check your white balance with the auto, and then, you know, just kind of adjust it to your liking. Maybe a little vignette again would kind of help here, and just leave it from there. So Peter, thank you very much for sharing your photos with us. It was a pleasure to review them. I hope few things were helpful to maybe move your photography forward. Stay safe and send us more pictures in the future. And the same goes for all of you folks. If you want to send us your images and join us for the next episode of our photography review show, all you have to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, and that's where you can find all the upcoming links, all the upcoming episodes, and all the information you need to join us and maybe become our photographer of the week. Take care, stay safe. My name was Jakub, and I can't wait to see you again next week.